All right, welcome to the Franchise Time Machine. A unusual afternoon, daytime stream for us, but there was an open slot in the schedule, and I went ahead and booked it. I think since then there'll be some changes, so we have some overlap. I don't think so, Max. I'm 3:30 to 5:30. Oh, you mean compared to normal? Yeah, I'll be back on at 10 p.m. Pacific too. Um, but Tom Tomato. You have not been abducted by aliens. I am just on early today. We're going to double dip. We'll have an afternoon stream and our usual 10 p.m. Pacific time stream. I'll have pack giveaways for both. In fact, I was working on the form for that. Let me pull it up. Yeah, be ready in 2 hours, Max. I'm coming to you. Let me see. Here we go. I'm uh, I'm just doing the form for so we're gonna do we did a sliders experiment in our usual time slot. We're trying to figure out what exactly happens when you do uh well, so for those of you who are maybe new to the base game, let me show you what we're talking about first. We're going to create a new we have a quick start that we use for these, and we'll call this steel sliders V01. Okay, so the first thing you should know is this league, all the teams and all the players have been set up to be completely identical and completely standardized and average. So as close to average ratings as possible. Even player heights and weights are the same. Um, the few differences that exist are things like there are some infielders and outfielders because their position rating requirements are different. But within the infielders, all the infielder ratings are the same. So we tried to take out any kind of variability we could so that whatever we're testing is the only variable that changes. Now, if you've played either base game or perfect team, you're probably familiar with these strategy sliders. Now, everyone in this league is set to sabermetric. And what we're going to do today is we're going to work with the stealing bases slider. Now, if you've gone to player strategy, you've probably seen when you go to a player strategy, they have similar sliders, the same scale. You can go to 5 clicks to the negative, 5 clicks to the positive, or in the middle, we're calling 0. But you have here adjust to team strategy settings or override team strategy settings. And I've noticed in watching streamers do roster builds and tournament prep, there seems to be a few different theories on what that means. And I don't know what it means either. So we're going to try to test to figure out what exactly adjust to team strategy does and what override team strategy does. Now, when I said we did this before with we did this with bunts before. The problem with bunts is they just don't happen enough to create enough data for us to see if there's a significant difference between the different types of settings. And when I say types of settings, um, they're going to look like this. Right? We'll have the team strategy either set to 0 or 5. So there's 4 teams in each sub-league. So the AL has 4 teams and the NL has 4 teams. Within each sub-league, we'll set up each team to look like this. One team will have stealing 0, so in the middle, and then all the players will get +5 adjust. Another team, the team setting will be 0, and all the players will get +5 override. And the other 2 teams will be +5 team and either +5 adjust or +5 override. And the the form for the pack giveaway today is basically trying to get to what you believe each of those things means. So the first question is, will all four teams, and then when I say four teams, we're going to combine the data for the zero team plus five adjust, for example. We'll combine the AL and the NL numbers. Finish with total steal attempts, that's stolen bases plus caught stealing, because we're not trying to measure the success of stealing. We're just trying to measure how often they steal. Because my understanding is that's what the steal bases slider adjusts. Will they all finish within 20% of each other? So basically, what that means is if you think these are all going to be basically the same, statistically the same, then you believe that plus five adjust and plus five override are the same when added to the zero team. And that the teams that are already plus five that adjust and override are not going to do anything push it beyond plus five. So that's gonna be the first question. Do you think they'll all be similar, right? All within 20% of each other. The 20% I chose kind of arbitrarily. Okay, so then the next question will be, um, so if you believe yes, you'll probably answer no to all the rest. So for those who answer no, then I think the question is, okay, well, where are the differences going to be? Um, and so I think the first part of that then is, will the two plus zero teams finish within 20% of each other? So then we're asking, okay, so this tiebreaker again is for the no's. So if you don't believe they're the same, then do you at least think that plus five adjust and plus five override are going to do the same thing to a team where the slider set to zero, right? Because there's still room to move five. So that's what the next question will test for. And then I think the next version of that is, will the two plus five teams so if you've already guessed no to get to this point, then you must think there's some gap between the two. So the other thing we're going to ask for here is, if you're adding, if you're starting with plus five, then do you think adding plus five adjust or adding plus five override is that going to do something different? Will it make different changes to the plus five teams? Okay. And then the last one, what will be, oh yeah, sorry. Um, which team, AL and NL combined, will have the most total steal attempts? Okay, and the choices there are zero team plus five adjust, zero team minus five adjust. Actually, maybe I'll make these the first questions. Oh, sorry, it's not minus five adjust, it's plus five override. +5 team, +5 adjust, and +5 team, +5 override. Okay. And then we'll copy this and we'll say who has the fewest. So I kind of like the idea of making, because even if you believe they'll be within 20% of each other, you might have an idea of like which team's going to finish highest or lowest. So let's start with that first. So if your answer to the first 20% question is yes, then I think by default you should be answering yes to the other two, right? Because if all four are within 20% of each other, any pair should be within 20% of each other. So then let's have a final tiebreaker that'll have a number so that just to clarify, I should say these are the +0 teams. It's a little clunky, but the whole experiment's a little clunky to get it to do what we need it to do. And then the final one, we do something like this so that we can, in case there's a tie all the way to this point, um, what will be the total number of deal attempts, stolen base plus caught stealing, um, by the team, AL and ML combined, with the most steal attempts. Okay, that should break any ties. And then in case it doesn't, I'll use the EVC rule, which is if we're still tied at this point, then whoever submitted first will win. We do we have two prizes, 7 packs for first place and 1 pack or 3 packs for second place. In fact, let me put that in here. First place equals 7 standard packs. Second place equals 3 standard packs. Oh, and I was planning to just fill that slot that was empty previously on the schedule until 5:30 Pacific, and then raid into you. Are you still going on at 5:30, Nolan? Okay, so let me put these teams back up while I make a link here, and let me open the form before Max tells me to open the form. Form is open. "1979 Mariners" continues then. All right, sounds good. All right, here's the form. Here's the open form. Pin it to the chat. People can enter anytime until we actually fire up the stream. But if you want to take off, I try to put on here as early as I can so people can fill it out and head out if they need to. You do not have to be present to win. Um, okay, so let's go ahead and rename our teams. One thing I just want to make sure. Yeah, you know what? I still have to redo this. For some reason, the quick save doesn't save the manager settings or the mailbox settings. All right. So the easiest way to do this to keep track of what we're editing each time is to go ahead and rename the teams. And we've learned through experience that it helps to rename the city because that's what shows up in some screens in OOTP. And it also helps to rename the abbreviation because that's what shows up in the statistics pages. So there's 0 team plus 5 adjust. And we'll call that 05. Oh, it's AL05A. Oh, yeah. So, Nolan, I can tell you a few things. That's a good point. Because I'm sure many people will not, have not seen the original attempt. Um, again, one of the reasons we're doing this with steals and redoing is because sacrifice hits or bunts did not give us enough data points to create enough separation. But it did seem like +5 override and +5 adjust. Wait, sorry. It did seem like +5 override does what the name suggests, which is it seems to ignore the team setting and just go with the player setting. Um, other than that, I don't think we're able to make any solid conclusions just because the number of bunts was so low. But with steals, there should be a lot more steals, or at least attempted steals, right? We're not measuring at all the success rate, so that's why we're just combining stolen bases and caught stealings. But there should be a lot more data to look at using that. Um, so yeah, so that's one thing. I mean, it is just a couple data points, Nolan, but that's at least one thing I took away from that first experiment. I think one of the big things there's like two big questions really. I think one is can you go over +5 if your team setting is at +5 and then you add to it +5 adjust or +5 override? Is it possible to then go above +5? The other question I think is um, whether you're starting at 0 or starting at +5 and you can go over +5. Does +5 adjust do anything different than +5 override? +5 team, +5 adjust. Now start. It's going to start to become like a mouthful as we talk about these teams, because it's a lot of team, adjust, override, and just numbers in between. American League 05 override. This is American League 5-5 adjust. +5 team, +5. I debated to whether or not to do this in the afternoon setting because a lot of people are not going to be familiar with the past experiments and they're not necessarily be familiar with our experimental setup. And might it be kind of confusing? But part of what I want to do is to bring to the afternoon the type of stuff we're doing late at night. And this is what we are doing. So I thought it'd be interesting for people to see. Plus, I think it's a question that comes up a lot when I watch these streams where people are setting up their sliders. Um, People have opinions of what they think it is, but I don't think anyone can say definitively. And maybe they still won't be able to say definitively after this is over, but at least we're going to take a shot at it. We're taking a very controlled setting. We're only changing these slider settings, and we're changing them in a very deliberate way. trying to follow the principles of the scientific method, just changing one thing at a time, um, to try to see if we can figure out how it's coded. Now, the other thing potentially we could do is ask, and I think um, how it's coded. Maybe OOTP would tell us. Maybe they wouldn't. But I think it's more fun to try to figure it out by doing an experiment. Okay, so here are the team names, right? I think they match. They match what we said we would do here. Zero team, which means in the middle, and then the player settings either +5 adjust or +5 override, and then the team setting at +5, and then on top of that, +5 adjust or +5 override. I think one of the big things is, can you go beyond +5 by having the team set at +5 and having a player setting beyond that? Um, that's one thing where I've heard people say different things, and then to the extent um, adjust and override are similar or different depending on the situation, like whether you're starting at 0 or +5, is another place where I've heard people have different theories. So with that, our team names should get updated. Yeah. So now we're going to go ahead and make those adjustments. So we're just going to go in and change. So first we need to change the team strategy. So let's do that first. Okay, this is a +5 team. So stolen bases, we're going to crank that all the way up to +5. We'll do all the teams first. Okay, this team is also a +5 team. This is also a +5 team. And this is the last +5 team. Okay, now we're at the 0 teams. So for these, we'll drop them down to 0. Now, for these, we used to say, okay, well, which team is going to win? Which team is going to lose? Um, yeah, Minerva, you did make it to a Franchise Time Machine stream. Every once in a while, when there's an opening in the schedule, I will try to jump in there if I'm available, um, especially to try to preserve the raid train to folks like Nolan and Ezra, so that we can still have an audience late at night. I try to jump in there. So this was wide open before. It seems like there are other streams have also filled in this time slot. So I'm very happy because that means no matter what happens, I think the raid train will make it to Nolan and Ezra. But this is a test I wanted to run no matter what. So I figured it'd be a good thing to do in the afternoon because it's a topic I see lots of people discussing without anyone really having a concrete answer to it. Now, we may not have a concrete answer when we're done, but at least we'll have given it a shot. All right, so now let's go ahead and make our edits to the players. We're only editing the lineups, and we're going to make every player up and down the lineup, up and down the roster. It's under batting ratings. Sorry, it's under batting. Sorry, no, sorry, it's under player strategy. Yeah, I know what it was. I wanted to show you this. Every player, right? I mentioned earlier, every player is identical, so they all have the same 125 running speed, stealing aggressiveness, stealing ability, base running skills, sacrifice bunting, bunting for hit. So the players themselves should not affect the test because they're all identical. So the only thing that's going to be different will be their strategies. All right, so you go into the first player, and I didn't realize people didn't know this, but once you're in a player in a roster situation, you can arrow up and down and just go from player to player. So you'll have to look at the name here because all their attributes are identically the same. But as you go up and down, you'll see the name and the uniform number change. So you can actually flip all the way through a roster that way. AZ Axel, thank you for the raid. Welcome everybody. We are doing an experiment today. I hope your stream went well. Let's see. Here is here's what we're doing today. Um, for everyone who just came in, uh, no, I see two different rates from you. I see one of 187 and one of two. So it does sum to almost 200. You are correct. We're doing an experiment to try to determine what actually happens if you have your team settings for a slider set at 0 or +5, and then on top of that, change your player slider for that same strategy to +5 adjust or +5 override. I guess a double rated by AZ Axel. So that's what we're trying to test. There is actually a form pinned in the chat for a 10-pack giveaway. You're going to try to guess the outcome of our experiment. And first place wins 7 packs, standard packs, and second place wins 3 standard packs. So AZ Axel, thank you for the raid, and OOTP Developments, thank you for the packs that we get to give away today. I'll also be streaming later tonight at 10 p.m. Pacific time in my usual time slot, and we'll have another pack giveaway then too, for a different experiment or simulation. So yeah, so all of their stealing ratings are the same. Their stealing aggressiveness is the same. So the only thing that would be different will be the team strategy and then the player strategy. So this team is a +5 adjust team. So we don't have to change the mode, which is adjust or override. And we're just going to change the stealing basis to +5, which is the maximum. The reason here, I'll show you the reason why we call it +5 is it's 5 clicks to the maximum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's why it's +5. So one of the a couple of the questions are based on if your team is at +5, right? If you're an adjust +5 player, does that mean you still stay at +5? Do you go somewhere beyond +5? It depends on your interpretation of what adjust to team strategy settings means. So again, I'm just going to arrow down and make this change to every player on the roster. So all 14 batters are going to have a +5 adjust to team strategy steal setting. And the DH is on, so the pitchers don't need to have this change made. And we've already changed the team settings, so that's already done. So we just have to change the player settings. Okay, so we're already done with this team. So the next team we want to do, we're just going to go down the list here. +5 team, +5 adjust in the National League, or the Neutral League is what we called it. So we can go to lineups, the first player on the lineups, which is the catcher number 1, and their strategy. And we're just going to keep arrowing down. Now, there may not be enough um, variations or teams here to get a complete picture, but we want to just start building a picture of what adjust and override might mean relative to each other. Okay, now this is a +5 team, +5 override. So we're going to change this to override and then drag the slider across. And again, especially if you're filling out the form, we're asking you to think about stolen base attempts, which is steals plus caught stealing, because we don't care about the success rate. We just care about how much they try to steal, which is what this stealing basis slider adjusts. So when I finish this team, I'm just going to arrow back up through the team to make sure I got all the overrides because I kind of feel like I might have missed one. Okay, so let's see. Let me go back through this. I'm arrowing back up through just to make sure. Yeah, okay, I got it all right. That's good. All right, so that was the Rangers. Now it's the +5 override, +5 team, +5 override Nationals. And the reason I renamed the teams first is just like what happened just now. Sometimes my brain freezes and I forget like what edit I'm making. So I just have to look at the name of the team and it tells me I'm doing override and +5. Oh, and I dragged the other one by mistake. I think, are we on an ad break? All right, I'm just going to keep making edits. You're not going to miss anything major here. Um, oh, we're back. Okay. Oh, Smiley Face Jane, welcome back to our stream. One of our nighttime regulars, and often the winner of either first or second place in our 10-pack giveaways. Oops. All right, so that team is done. Okay, now these are the teams with the 0 setting, right? You look at here, the team setting for stolen bases is 0. And this is 0 team +5 adjust. So adjust the team strategy setting stays, and we're just going to max out this slider. These are the easiest ones to edit because I don't have to do 2 different things to each. Another reason I chose this experiment for today is I've got a shorter time here and a harder stop, especially compared to Saturdays or Sundays when I'm not rating into anybody because no one's streaming that late. Because Max has to sleep for his job. Um, I do the more complicated ones where there's a lot more edits to set up the experiment. So this was a good fit for the time slot too. Okay, and the Braves are the same setting where the team has a 0 and then the players are going to get a +5 adjust. So basically, the AL and the NL are identical also. The reason we run them though is it gives us double the data points. There's no interleague play, so that's not a confounding factor. So again, I'm just looking up here. It's +5 adjust, so I don't have to change the override part. I just have to move this slider. For me, one of the big questions is going to be the +5 team settings. Does having +5 override or +5 adjust seem to cause it to go even beyond +5 or not? Um, and if so, do they do it to the same extent? All right, so we have 2 more teams to do, and then we'll be ready to run our experiment. Now this is the team is set at +5 at 0, and the players gonna be at +5 override. Oops. Override. Override. And if anyone's having any problems with filling out the form for the contest, please let me know and I'll try to help you out. There we go. All right, we have one team left to do. Are all the stats equal for the team? So if you mean ratings, then not only are the ratings equal for all the teams, they're identical for every player. So all the batters have the same batting ratings, the same speed, stolen base ratings, and they're all set to as close to, uh, as far as we can tell, what average is in 2023 Major League Baseball. So for most batting attributes, that seems to be around 400. Yeah, so yeah, we try. That's a good way to put it. No, we try to create like a true test environment where nothing is different except the one thing we're changing, which is the stealing sliders. All right, this is the last of the teams that are 0 team +5 override, and this is actually the last team we have to edit. Oh, the computer must have control of this team. So, um, which is weird because I'm in commissioner mode. We've had this happen before too. I guess I can just apply for the job. Yeah, let me now if I go back there I should be able to. Yeah, now I can edit it. So override +5. Oops. Override +5. There we go. And so let me save this real quick. And one thing I'm going to do is just to keep the AI from doing anything weird, we're just going to set it to all teams under human control. So it shouldn't make any other changes. And then let me just make sure that it kept all the. We'll just pick another team at random here and make sure that the slider stayed put. Dang it. Did I just undo all my changes? Okay, let's load the game I just saved. Hopefully it doesn't I was worried that I might screw that up. Okay, now let's check again. What the heck? Did I just undo all my changes? Oh man, I think I just did. Okay. Well, everyone, you have more time to fill out your forms because I think I just undid all my changes. Wow, everything changed. Oh, even the wait, did all the lineups get undone too? No, those are still there. All right, as long as we're in this situation, let me just make sure I'm going to control all the teams so that, well, that's a bummer. I should have done this from the beginning. Just put every team under human control and then made all the edits. I knew that the reverse was true. If you put everyone under computer control after you've made edits, it'll undo everything you've done. I didn't think the reverse would be true. Okay, so I guess we'll just do it over. Fortunately, this is like I said, this is one that doesn't take too long to do. Team strategy. This now it was sabermetric before. That now it's all neutral. I don't think it matters as long as this is set right. So we're going to set this to +5 team, and then all the players are +5 adjust. Uh, what a bummer to have to do it over again. But this sort of thing happens all the time in our stream, so I think it's only fair that I guess the afternoon audience get to see see one of our mistakes too. All right, well that team's already done. That was actually relatively painless. This next one too, we just have to set the team strategy. I have to remember to set the team strategy this time because I had set them previously. Okay, this is an adjust team, so we don't have to do anything but the slider. These are the easier ones. Okay. +5 team. This time is +5 override. Oh, let me just do it this way. I wonder if it's easier to. Let me try this. I'm going to do all the sliders first, and then I'll do all the overrides next. I wonder if that'll make it faster. Because it's just one motion. And then I'll do all the override changes now, because that's the same motion. I don't know if it's faster, but it kind of feels faster. Okay. So that team's done. The Nationals. Man, I can't believe I messed that up. This is a +5 team and +5 override players. You're going to hear me repeating that to myself over and over because it's how I remember to make the right edits. Yeah, and in the form that, will they be within 20% of each other? That's an arbitrary number I picked to say, are they going to be similar to each other? I could have picked 10, could have picked 15. But to me, the pack giveaway is a little different from the conclusions we're going to draw. So even if they're, 25% apart, depending on what the data looks like, we may still arrive at some conclusions. So the 20 is completely arbitrary, in case anyone was wondering about that. Okay, now these are zero teams. The good thing here is I don't have to change the team settings because they've defaulted to zero. So that's one less thing to do. And these are +5 adjust. So again, this is the easy one to do. Oh, it's already done. Wow, that was fast. Okay, this next one should also be as fast because the team strategy is already set, and these are just slider changes. Thank goodness this wasn't a more complicated experiment to set up, or having to do it twice, I would just probably want to just give up. I should probably get one of those random drawing things just in case I ever have an experiment or sim go sideways, so I can still do the pack giveaways if the experiment falls apart. Uh, the other affiliates, streamers have been very kind about showing me the rope, so I'm sure one of them would happily send me the link to that. So I should remember to do that at some point. Okay, these are +5 overrides, so these are the slightly more annoying ones to do, but I think doing them separately was maybe faster or was less annoying, but I don't think it was faster. So I'm just going to do this. Now, I'm sure watching it twice has been super annoying to all of you, so I apologize and thank you for continuing to stick around. And I hope part of the reason you're staying around is because you want to see what happens here. I am very curious to know what we get out of this experiment. There are a few times where I don't have a strong perspective on what I think is going to happen, but this is one of them. Other than I do think I know what override will do. I just don't know um, what the adjust will do. So let's just make sure strategy is set at 0. All right, and I tell I say this in the stream all the time. Um, I am lovely background noise while sending daily reports to water pump companies, says Nolan. Thank you, Nolan. I appreciate that. I'm happy to be of service to you and your water pump reporting. Wait, did I already do this team? Oh, I did this team because this is the one I was doing when I did the override by mistake. Okay, so that team, it looks completely done. All right, let me just do a quick scan here. That is that remember, that's probably right. That is probably the best compliment I've ever received for my stream. That is good white noise. All right, yeah, these all look good. I do like to do this final check just because I'd much rather take a few minutes here to discover any mistakes than to find out the hard way when we see something weird in the results and find it out that way. Okay, these look good. So we're going to just save this. And one thing we started doing is we save every experiment as a quick start in case we either want to run it back or we discover a mistake, we can go back and it's basically like a backup, but much more easily accessible. So I really like these quick starts a lot. And so we enter a description. It's 0 team or +5 team with +5 player adjust or +5 player override. Okay, so this is normally the point at which um, I roll some ads to get them out of the way so we don't get interrupted during the sim. It's your last minute notice to complete your form to get entered into the contest, and it gives me a chance to go get some more water. So yeah, no one is listening again. Hopefully, you're also filling out a form. So let's do. Let me run a couple minutes of commercials, and that should put off ads enough for us to finish the experiment and for you to fill out your forms and get them submitted. I will ask for a last call before I close the form. All right, be right back. All right, if we're back from ads. So let's get ready to sim. Let me get everything ready before I turn off the form. Give everybody a little more time. Um, I'm just going to do a quick spin through the game settings to make sure everything's the way we like to have set up for these experiments. So there's a little blurb in the form that tells you what's turned off. We end up turning a lot of stuff off in the experiments because, again, we're trying to minimize the things that can cause variability. Um, so things like player development, things like personality, uh, those are all things that can throw a wrench in the. Oh, see, we did not lock these. We need to lock these. Okay, I'm glad I checked. I have to make a note to change that in the master quick start too. So that multiplier setting, that's important because I've streamed this at night and during the afternoon, so you might have seen it. But there's a there's a VOD on my Twitch account that I highly recommend if you aren't familiar with the topic about a league full of Babe Ruths. And if you bring nothing but Babe Ruth into a league and nothing but Jose Limas, who was a terrible gopher ball pitcher in the year 2000, who's actually had some good years, but that year he was terrible. Um, if you don't account for the modifiers and lock them out, your Babe Ruth will all hit around 20 home runs instead of 60. Um, and frankly, facing Jose Lima, they actually should end up hitting about 100 home runs. But none of that happens if you let the leave the auto modifiers off. So we always turn them off. Anyway, it'll make more sense if you watch that VOD if you're not familiar with the topic. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. We'll go back to the settings, the standing screen. I'm going to close the form. If anyone's still working on it, please let me know, and I'll hold off for a little bit. But otherwise, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close the form. I'm actually surprised. We have about the same number of respondents we should get at 10 p.m. Pacific time. I don't know if I made the form too complicated or everyone's just away from keyboard, but one of the things we always do is I always create the sheet now. I anonymize it first, so I'm going to hide all the identifier information. And then let's take a look to see what our collective guesses look like. All right, so the first question, which team will have the fewest stolen base attempts? And we have actually some variability here, which is great. That's a lot of fun. Um, 2 for 0 team plus 5 override, 2 for 0 team plus 5 adjust, and 1 for plus 5 team plus 5 adjust. So then it's this going to be survivor style. So, but again, we have to find 2 winners. So you have to keep going. So the next question is, which team will have the most stolen base attempts? And again, Cavacom, thank you for the raid. Welcome. Uh, I think I saw earlier, Cavacom, you were doing your NCAA football stream. Ludlud, welcome to the stream. So here's what we're working on today. You lost 2 games. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I hope you at least had fun in the stream, which I'm sure you did. So yeah, Cavacom, longtime streamer of OTP. I'm almost always in his Sunday stream watching him cover
Why do you keep
his
following me
teams in
around?
the league playoffs, the OTP league playoffs. It's always a great time. Super fun chat. So I highly recommend a follow there. Ludlud, thank you for the follow. Yeah, so Ludlud's someone I see all the time in Cava's chat, so it's kind of cool to have Ludlud in our stream today. So yeah, we're trying to figure out through experimentation. We have a league of completely average and identical players. We're only going to change the stealing sliders for the team stealing settings and for the player stealing settings. And if you're not familiar with what that looks like, let's just go to any team here, and I'll throw it up on the screen in a second. All right, so if you go to a player and their individual strategies, so the team has a strategy, and then the players have strategy. And within that strategy, you can set it to adjust to team strategy settings or override team strategy settings. And I've seen many streamers do roster builds and play with those settings, and there doesn't seem to be any consensus on what override versus adjust means. So I thought we'd experiment with it and see if we could tell what it means. So let's go back to the form. And so there is a we haven't started yet. Let me open the form because we just had some people rate in. Um, what I will do is I won't show. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's not fair. Yeah, maybe that's not fair because I've already shown the guesses. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We'll just proceed because I think I've already revealed what the guesses are. I think that gives an advantage to the people who come in later. So I apologize. Smiley Face Jane says, I think the adjust just adjusts it to the team sliders and ignore whatever sliders. Oh, so that's interesting. I have not heard that one before. Let's see. Adjust it to the team sliders. Oh, okay. Again, a, another theory, and they all make sense to me. So that's why I want to do the experiment to see like what actually happens. Okay, so then which team will have the most steal attempts? This one, there's a little more consistency. Most people seem to have gone with the +5 team +5 override, with one person taking the +5 team +5 adjust. I personally, if I was, I think any team had a chance of standing out on the high side. Love says we love science. I would have thought it's the +5 team +5 adjust because the theory being override just says, okay, replace the team setting with my player setting, which means replace +5 with +5. There have been people who theorize that +5 adjust means whatever the team setting is, whether it's -5 or 0 or +5, you then add +5 to it. So theoretically, that would mean this is +10. One way that wouldn't work though is if the maximums are -5 and +5. So who knows? We'll start to find out. Okay. The next tiebreaker is, will all four teams finish within 20% of each other? So this is saying, okay, whether there's, whether one team finishes for lowest or highest, or they all kind of clump together. I think if you say yes to this, it means basically override and just probably mean the same thing. We're looking at stolen base attempts, so steals plus caught stealing, led, because we wanted to take stolen base ability out of the question, and so we don't care about whether they were successful or not, just how often they try. All right, so if you say yes here, then I think what that probably means is override and just mean roughly the same thing. And for the most part, it doesn't necessarily matter where you start at +5 or 0. So then the next question is, will the 2 +0 teams, so those are the teams starting with +0 team, be within 20% of each other? So if you're saying no, that means that you think +5 adjust means something different than +5 override, which again, many people theorize that, so that makes sense. Okay, and then the last question before we get into the numbers. Now, I'm not going to show the numbers because those I think we like to save till the very end in case we need them. Will the 2 +5 teams, so the one starting with +5 steal, will they end up within 20% of each other? So people are saying yes. So I'm taking that to mean that there are people who theorize that -5 +5 is the maximum you can have. So whether you get that through a combination of team and individual, that there's a ceiling there, and so you won't get anything beyond that. So that would make sense then that you'll finish within 20% of each other because both teams will be set at the maximum. All right. Well, let's see what happens. Oh, sorry. I was showing this. This I was talking about them. These are the guesses here that we were showing. Did I not have the guesses up the whole time? If so, I apologize. All right. So we have our guesses. Um, let's see what happens. Now, we used to do these things asking which team would win, assuming that uh, whatever, and that doesn't work for this because this we're not saying stealing more or stealing less is better or worse, right? So we wouldn't have done that for this anyway. But for things like pitcher attributes and things like that, but the problem is there's too much variability because let's say you're testing starting pitchers, then you have the bullpen that's completely average. Or if you're testing batters, you have all kinds of other things that can happen to win or lose games. And so we found that that was clouding the conclusion. So now we just go straight to the statistics, but we still do the season just because it's like a kind of a fun way to see things play out. So we're going to start, we go month by month. In 2023, we have 2 days in March. So we'll just get a quick sample of a couple games. Um, so in the average league, everyone's 1-1. And in the neutral league, we have two teams 2-0 and two teams 0-2. And again, I don't anticipate any kind of pattern in the standings because uh, everyone's stealing ability is average. Some teams are just going to be stealing more or less. I don't necessarily know that that leads to a change in the standings. So I will not be at all surprised if the standings end up looking very random. Yeah, and so far it looks like pretty scattershot. Let's we're at the end of May, so let's sim June. Well, this is interesting. The zero team +5 adjust teams are both in first place and by 7 games. So it's not an insignificant lead. Hmm. That's a little surprising. It could be noise. Let's go to the All-Star break. Now, normally we would look at the All-Star rosters to see if there are additional patterns we're noticing, but again, we don't think this has any bearing on whether a team is successful or not, so I don't think it's going to be that meaningful. Ludla is guessing the team uh, stealing more will win less because they're doing it less efficiently if they're average at stealing. That's a good point. Um, yeah, so that means we might be getting some hints. I think Ludla's logic really works there. We could be getting some hints that the teams at the bottom of the standings here are going to be the ones with more stolen base attempts at the end of the season when we look at the data. So we might be getting a sneak preview here, which also kind of goes with, if you have a zero base and just +5 is adjust, that, maybe you're having fewer steal attempts. Um, let's finish this day. Again, it should have no bearing, but let's just take a quick look at the All-Star voting. What we're looking for is there should be no patterns because unless in the standings there should be no patterns. There might be a pattern based on what Ludla's saying, which does make sense. I think at the player level for All-Star voting, we should not be seeing any patterns, and if we do, then I think there might be something interesting going on. Smiley Face Jane says it's a tough call because all hold runners and arm are average too. That's right. That's right. No one's especially good or bad at holding runners or throwing out runners. Um, there's just more of it for certain teams. So yeah, I'm not seeing any real patterns jumping out here. So I face Jane said the game likes stolen bases, so maybe whichever team steals the most gets the most. Oh, that is true. That is true. We have found that the AI tends to overvalue speed when it comes to things like MVP voting, Silver Slugger awards. Yes, and last night we did see Silver Slugger awards where if you just looked at what I would consider batting stats, right? Like average OPS, home runs, they're not that impressive, but they all had tons of stolen bases, which I guess if you look in BREF and look at batting stats, stolen bases do show up. I guess they're more offensive stats. And I do think, and I think we're seeing in our experiments that the the game engine, when it comes to evaluating performance, whether it's for the All Star game or awards, it does seem to put a big premium on speed, especially stolen bases. Smiley Face Jane says, "Get it with All Star MVP, but Silver Slugger doesn't really make sense." Yeah, and I think that's evidence that it's treating Silver Slugger as an offensive award, not a hitting award. But I'm with you. I definitely think the game overvalues speed there. So, that is interesting. Theoretically, right? You should see if everything's equal, you would see zero team and plus five team as often as each other. But all these have two zeros and a plus five, two zeros and a plus five, two zeros and a plus five. So I would say zero team is appearing more often than I would have expected. But I think we're also hypothesizing that because zero team plus five adjust is at the top of the standings, they're being more successful. I don't know. I think this is an interesting thing to connect to eventually when we see the stats. Well, it is flipping here though, because now when it might just be noise too, because it's center field and right field. There's two plus fives and a zero, so it could just be noise. People's brains love to see patterns even when there are no patterns. So you know, let's see if the selections have anything worth noting. This is another reason why we change the abbreviations when we set up the leagues. Because in a setting like this is the only way we have to know which team they're from. So 050 means zero team plus five override. The A in the beginning just means AL for average league or NL for neutral league. So yeah, I'm not really seeing anything. The chat in our nighttime streams is usually way better at noticing anomalies here than I am. Um, oh, another thing that we've noticed. I mean, it's not going to apply here because everyone in this league is created. But anytime we import or create players in the base game, they never get all star votes for starting pitcher or reliever. It doesn't matter what kind of crazy good season they're having. And that's even after I always turn off the importance of popularity on the all star vote. So it should just be performance based. They still never get votes. It drives me batty. Okay, so not really seeing anything there. It might be interesting to go back and look at this after we see how the season and the stats play out, and then be like, oh, okay, in hindsight, that makes sense. Um, again, this is meaningless, but we always do the home run challenge. So we have average outfielder four advancing 12 to 5. 12 to 5. Wow. Average infielder three, average outfielder one, and average outfielder three advancing. 12 to 9 and 9 to 8. Average outfielder 4 and average outfielder 3 advance. No infielders left. And congratulations to average outfielder 4. Wins 10 to 8. All right, and again, this is less meaningless than this one because we're not changing anyone's attributes, but we'll just go ahead and uh, quick play the All Star game. Average outfielder 1 wins the MVP. Look at this. Average catcher 2 in the National League hit 2 bombs. How were they not the MVP? Let me look at this box score here. Who was the player of the game here? Average outfielder 1 in the National League. What did they do? What did they do that was better than 2 bombs? Oh, wait, I forgot his name already. Who was it? Average outfielder 1. 1 for 3 with 2 RBI. Okay, they hit a home run, but I thought, oh, did I read that wrong? I thought it said here NL average catcher. Oh, no. Okay. I was looking at the 2 in the name and thought it was 2 home runs. My mistake. Okay. All right. Congratulations, All Star MVP, average outfielder 1. 1 for 3 with a home run and 2 RBI and a run scored. And I just realized I'm not showing the game. There we go. How long was that not up? I'm so sorry. how long was I simming without the screen showing? Oh man. Uh, all right, let's go back to the standings. All-Star break is over. We are Yeah, interesting. This is interesting to me. The 0 team +5 adjust is in first place. Togmado. That got Togmado to come out of lurking mode to to comment on my professionalism. Yeah, there is something here. I think Love that's right. There is something going on here with this. Probably around the fact that they're not running themselves out of innings, but we'll see. Okay, we're going to finish the month of July here. Expect no less, or maybe even no more. All right. Well, the races have tightened up. The 0 team +5 adjust team has actually fallen to second place in the AL. There's only 2 games now separating the top 2 teams, and it's different teams on both sides. It's the +5 team +5 adjust in the AL and the +5 team +5 override in the NL. So again, it's hard to draw any conclusions here from the standings, but we've learned to hold that hope for the stats. The stats often hold the key to the experiment. All right, we are now at the end of August, and again, the 2 leagues are very different now. The NL has 1 team running away with it, and it's a +5 team +5 override team. In the AL, there's 2 teams at the top, +5 team +5 adjust, and 0 team +5 adjust. So really, no patterns here. All right, let's finish the regular season. And with 1 game left, let's go ahead and sim the end of the season here. Okay, this is always weird when this happens. When everyone's completely average and we haven't touched the pitchers at all, one pitcher managed to win a triple crown. There's no coaching, there's no player development. This is pure RNG as far as we know, because we've turned off anything that could lead to one pitcher becoming better than the others. And the only things we've changed in here are stealing settings, which should have no bearing on pitching stats. So that is always wild when that happens. Let me screenshot. It's rare enough that it happens. I'm going to screenshot this. So it's average starter 6 on the +5 team +5 override nationals. 19 and 10, 3.02 ERA, 188 strikeouts. And again, it's an everyone's average, so these stats don't jump out at you. Maybe the 19 wins do, but 188K. That's not. Uh, you wouldn't expect that to be eye catching. All right. Well, we'll see where those numbers kind of fall in compared to the other league leaders in those categories. But yeah, that's always a rare thing in this average league when that happens. And sometimes, though, it points to something underlying in the data. But in this case, because we're just dealing with steals, I would doubt it. All right, so let's do the playoff tree. We'll finish out the postseason, and then we'll look at the stats, and then we can award some packs. All right, we have the 0 team +5 adjust Angels playing against the +5 team +5 adjust Mariners. Nolan should be happy the Mariners made it into the playoffs. The 0 team +5 adjust Braves are playing the +5 team +5 override Nationals. Now, this is small sample size within a small sample size, so we don't usually put a lot of weight into the postseason. We just play it out for fun. Both series go to 7 games, and the Mariners lose. What a surprise! Interestingly, it's 0 team +5 adjust teams in the World Series. Again, don't read too much into this. This is small sample size within a small sample size. I'm sure it's just coincidence at this point. Or is it they were the teams that were leading the standings at the midway point? All right, let's see what happens here in the World Series. It goes to 7 games. And okay, this is sad. I did a sim last night where it was my all-time favorite Mets and their peak seasons as their peak Mets seasons as the roster playing in 2023. And my game score for that team was less than the game score for a team in this average league with stolen base slider settings being tested. I'm going to take a picture of this just to reinforce how sad the Mets are. Man, it's a real bummer. Yeah, 952. Yeah. All right. So, um, oh, let me get a screenshot of the World Series playoff run here. And now let's start looking at some stats. Okay, again, nothing here is out of the ordinary. This the home runs, the batting average, this is what we usually see unless we're making drastic changes to the average league. Um, and I actually made the average league play itself with no changes, and this is around what you see. The average is maybe a touch high. But let's scroll down to the stolen bases and see if there's anything interesting there. Yeah, these are not particularly high either. So even though they had the green light, I mean it's a little higher than normal, but it's not like we're seeing 70, 80 steals. Again, because they might be going a lot, but they're also getting caught a lot because they're just not. No one's great at it. These strikeout totals are high though. That's interesting. Now let's look at the pitching stats and see. Okay, the 19 wins. There was an 18 win pitcher up there too. The 3.02 ERA actually was significantly below um, the second place, which was also significantly below the third place. So those two starters did stand out, but within one season, that can just be RNG. It is possible. And then for strikeouts, 196. 196 is right in the pack. It just happens to be at the top of the pack. So, you know, it does seem, other than the ERA, everything does seem plausible with just, RNG coin flipping. Okay, let's go to what we're really looking for, which is the team stats, and stolen bases are under batting. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll leave this up. I'm going to start a Google Sheet because the answers are going to depend on the totals of. So for each team, like 0 team plus 5 adjust, it's going to be based on totals from the AL and the NL teams. And sometimes we find that when we do the summing, it takes some of the noise out. And so the picture becomes a little more clear. Togmado is working on an international uh, baseball league in OOTP. And it says some of these Pakistani player names, glad I don't have to say them out loud. You mean, well, they wouldn't be a BREF, so there's no pronunciation guide, I guess. So I'll leave this up. Feel free to, comment and chat if you're noticing anything. But I'm going to create a sheet to start um, tabulating our results. And then as soon as I have the numbers up and I start summing, I'll share the sheet so that you can see what the totals look like. That's weird. I just opened a new sheet and it defaulted to like a weird, like typewriter looking font. Okay, now it's a different font, but it still looks weird to me. Okay, and AL stolen bases, AL caught stealing, NL stolen bases, NL caught stealing, total stolen bases, total caught stealing, total attempts. That's how I'll do it. Okay, so I will show this in a second. Smiley face Jane is confused. Sometimes I will say summing them might uh, clear up some of the confusion, but let me knock that out real quick. As I'm entering in, I'm also getting confused. Like I'm kind of seeing the story a little bit as I put it together, but okay. Let me share this. Let me just clean up the formatting a little bit. Where is okay? Let me blow this up a bit so you can see it better. So it took me a second because the this order is the order they're in the AL, and then I had to make sure I got the right numbers in for the NL because the order is different in the NL. So let's oh, I hate when it puts this there because I can't see the row numbers. All right, hold on. It might work better if I do it down here, and I'll just drag it up. Yeah. Wow. This is crazy. Well, it's not necessarily crazy though, because it was one of the choices in the form, which was okay, there's a little bit of difference here. It's definitely within 20% though. So let's do a sort. We'll sort it by attempts, high to low. Well, that's surprising. The most attempts came from the zero team +5 override team, and the fewest attempts came from the +5 team +5 override, with a big caveat that the difference from top to bottom is very small, right? Let's look at right from the bottom. The top is only 4% more than the bottom number, and the ceiling numbers, yeah, are almost identical. Um, so part of what this makes me think then is you're basically it's basically almost saying like at least if you're starting at 0 and going up to +5, all of these are basically ending at the top end of the scale, right? There's some artificial barrier that they're all bumping up against and keeping them at all the same. So one thing I think we can say with some certainty is there is no going beyond 5. If your team settings at 5, you can't use adjust 5 to go beyond +5. And it also does seem to be saying if you're starting at 0, whether you use override or adjust, you're ending up at +5. So, I mean, it's unraveling part of the question of how override and adjust work, but it's definitely not giving us the full answer. I mean, across this number of samples, I think a 4% difference is in the noise. Now, is there some reason that the zero teams would have better success at stealing? Because if you look at, I know I said there should be no difference in the success rates because everyone's ability at stealing is average, but I mean, there's a reason I didn't ask this question because I didn't think it would be material. But Oops. Ah. Okay, I'm just going to type it in. This is annoying me. Equals F2 divided by the sum of. Oh, I need the parentheses. That's why it wasn't working. I mean, again, it might just be noise, but it probably is. It's less than a half percentage point. So it's probably just coincidence that the teams were slightly more successful. It jumps out because the caught stealings are the same and the stolen base numbers go up. So it seems like there's more there than there actually is, but it's all within the noise. I am curious though when adjust and override are going to be different. I do think if we start at -5, I do think +5 override would just take it straight to +5. And if you start at -5, +5 adjust would take it to 0. I just think that's going to be the next experiment. Instead of 0 to +5, let's start at 0 to -5. Because I do think +5 override means whatever your team setting was, we're replacing it with +5 or whatever X is, if it's X override. But we now have our answers for the pack giveaway, so we can go back to that. Let me unhide the Twitch the Twitch IDs of our winners. Hold on, give me a second. Bear with me. Unhide columns. And I'm still going to hide these two columns. Okay. So here we go. All right. Which team will have the fewest total steal attempts? Now, it's by a very small margin, but the fewest was +5 team, +5 override. Now, no one guessed that. So we go to our next tiebreaker, which is which team will have the most? The most was 0 team, +5 override. No one guessed that. Amazing. I did not mean for this to be so difficult, but all right. Will all four teams, A and L combined, finish within 20% of each other? Absolutely so. They finish within uh, less than 5% of each other. So we are taking the yeses here. Okay, we're down to 3. So we go to the next question. Will the 2 plus 0 teams finish with total steal attempts within 20% of it? Yes, they did. So we have one first place winner already. Our one first place winner is Waynham. More Waynham, which I believe I'm assuming is an alt for Waynham. So congratulations, Waynham. You won the 7 packs. And between the Nolan Network podcast and Max LP, two of our West Coast uh, evening and late night streamers, who will win the final tiebreakers? will the two +5 teams finish within 20? Well, everyone said yes to that one. So, what will be the total number of stealing attempts for the team with the most steal attempts? And the total number with the most was 763. Amazingly, Waynham was very close to 760 with 810. Waynham would have won the final tiebreaker as well. But our winner is this player down here, which is Max LP 80. So Waynham, more Waynham is in first place. Let me just make note of that here. First place. And second place is Max LP 80. So thank you for playing. Um, I do wish there were some more strikingly obvious kind of takeaways from the data, but I do think this in itself is interesting that kind of no matter what your starting point was, and whether you're adjust or override, you end up with this very similar amount of steals. And so I think part of what that's saying is I don't think there's a going beyond +5. That's something I feel pretty comfortable concluding at this point because if there was +5 team, +5 adjust, seems like it should have gone beyond that +5 barrier. So we should have had at least 2 or 3 teams hitting that barrier of +5, and then +5 team, +5 adjust, then going beyond it. And so it does seem like there's a cutoff at +5. I think to draw more conclusions from that, I think we need to do another version of this where starting with -5 and 0 and doing +5. Because that's where I think you'll see my hypothesis is when you start with -5 team and +5 override versus +5 adjust, I think +5 adjust, you're going to end up close to 0. And with +5 override, you are going to jump all the way to the +5, and you'll end up with 750-ish attempts. The other good thing is, because the league is standardized, we can keep this data, and we can potentially compare it to data from other experiments. Theoretically, it should be comparable because the only thing we're changing are the slider settings. So, yeah. So, sometimes we get one not so impressive conclusion. Sometimes we're able to draw some amazing conclusions and unexpected ones at that. Um, yeah, but I still think there is something to be said for learning that, there does seem to be a maximum and it does seem to be around that +5 setting. So, all right. Well, I think there's nothing left to do here but raid into Nolan. But if before we do, I just wanted to kind of zip through some of the types of things we do late at night, 10 p.m. Pacific time, the different kinds of streams we do. So an experiment like this is pretty typical. Oh yeah, hey Nolan, no problem. I'm on the schedule till 5:30. I just wanted to give you a heads up, and if you wanted the raid earlier, I'm happy to do it. But yeah, I'm planning to go till 5:30. So um, I like to kind of stick with the schedule when I can. But it's like today, what we did was pretty typical. We do different kinds of experiments to try to understand better how the base game works. Sliders is a tricky one because you just don't get a lot of big obvious answers. But we've done things like we learned a ton about number of pitches in a pitcher's repertoire, and where you see big jumps in performance as you go from 2 pitches to 3 pitches. But then that changes if the last pitch you're adding is a crappy pitch, right? Like the super low rated pitch. In some ways, it doesn't count towards that improvement in performance, and in other ways, it does matter. But and that data was very clear from the experiment, and so those definitely feel like more of like a home run when it comes to an experiment. We also do things like last night, I kicked off a series of saves we're going to do where I'm calling them franchise favorites, where I've asked different people in the streamer community and some folks from my audience to, for their favorite franchise, give me a roster of the your all time favorite players from that franchise and the peak season with your franchise. And we're going to run them through the 2023 season based on the using the settings we usually use for these simulations, and just kind of see how the teams do in that environment. You know, compare the results to each other. You know, it is just one season simulation, so it's a small sample size, but it's still fun to kind of compete. And then what I'm going to do is put all of those rosters into a league where it'll be all of our favorite players competing against each other. And I think that will be a whole different level of fun. Um, we have another one where it's it's a similar structure, but we're using the player creation engine, and you get so many legends, so many stars, so many good, so many average, so many bench, and so many scrubs. You get five generated players per level, and so you decide like, okay, I want my legend players to be a shortstop, a catcher, and three starting pitchers, or whatever you decide. And so for each one, we generate five players. You get to pick which one you want to keep, and we build your roster, and then we run it through the league. 2023 again, 23 major leagues. And then we'll also put that roster in a league, and we'll have all of our player generated, our created players compete against each other. So we have like those kind of season sims. And then what else? Oh, this is what I was talking about earlier. With does the number of pitches matter? Um, we have. Oh yeah, we do the like Laptop Hound's a big Dave Steve and Kitty Bransfield fan, so I did an entire roster of each player is either a different year of Dave Steve or a different year of Kitty Bransfield, and we put them in 2023. What else? Oh yeah, prior to PTCS, I did a test. I did it in 1990, but before PTCS, I did it as. Oh, why can't I find it? Oh, here it is. Oh no, that's when we took the whole major leagues back to 1900. That's a different experiment, but was also an interesting experiment. I did one right before PTCS where I was trying to figure out how much HRA would matter in PTCS. So in the most recent PTCS, here it is. It was 1922, which is not quite dead ball, and it was in the Polo Grounds, which is actually a home run boosting park. I think it was like 1.2 was 1.201 was the modifier. Um, but in the build up to PTCS, I saw a lot of roster building streams where people were like really leaning into it's near dead ball, so I'm not going to pay as much attention to HRA. I'm going to focus on P BABIP and control. And I was like, is that right? And if you just look at the ratios in Baseball Reference, it's right-ish, right? It says HRA is uh, not as important. But when we simmed it out, for example, the home run leaders went from like 50 some home runs to 30 some home runs, which isn't nothing, but it's still significant. So based on that simulation, which we did Friday night, unfortunately, I was up pretty late Friday night into Saturday morning, changing my rosters because I too had leaned into I can these pitchers that have great profiles except their HRA is terrible. I'm going to throw them in PTCS. And I'm like, after I saw that data, I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. I have to raise the floor on my picture. So we do stuff like that, just kind of checking out specific things that might come up. Um, and then what else? We have Oh yeah, let me find this slide for it. We did this one. I think I mentioned it earlier. What happens when you have a league full of Babe Ruths? I think we did a pretty good job of confirming that this normalization or totals issue exists, which is if all you have are Babe Ruths in the league, the way OTP is default setting is that instead of hitting 60 home runs, they're going to hit 20 some home runs. But there's an easy way to undo that, so you can let Babe Ruth play like Babe Ruth. I think that was a really good one. And then um, we do a lot of kind of topical simulations. So about a month ago, maybe a little longer at this point, a month and a half ago, after Billy Bean, not the Moneyball Billy Bean, but the Billy Bean who had become the VP of, I think, diversity and inclusion for Major League Baseball. When he passed away, he and Glenn Burke, and it turns out there was another one, a pitcher, were the only three former major leaguers who were openly gay. And so I found a bunch of other former and current former professional baseball players, none are current, who are also openly LGBTQ, and uh, kind of like shoehorned a way to put them into a major league roster and give them kind of, you know, major league ish attributes, because there, a lot of them only had minor league stats and minor league ratings, and do a sim with them. So that was very much a kind of um, a topical experiment. And then I just do things that like interest me. So when the Nellie Fox card was introduced by Sporer during a Twipped, I was impressed at how good his Avoid K was. And I also knew that the Nate Cornejo card, which is a low iron card that has stuff of 10, which is super low in Perfect Team. I wanted to see what happens when you have a league full of Nelly Foxes who don't strike out hit against a league full of Nate Cornejos who don't strike anybody out. And that's actually how I came to confirm and want to test the whole Babe Ruth issue, because it happened here, where this pitcher who doesn't strike anyone out was suddenly striking out Nelly Fox, and I was like, "What is going on here?" That's one experiment actually like leading to another. So anyway, those are the kinds of things we do. 10 p.m. Pacific time, most nights except Wednesdays. I am an OOTP affiliate, so I have affiliate drops. I also have pack giveaways like we did today, this afternoon. I'll be doing a pack giveaway again tonight. 10 packs, 7 for first place, 3 for second place. But more than the packs, I think we have a really good time doing the experiments and competing in the pack giveaways. But really, it's more about like the chat and me having a good time. So hopefully you can join us. I know the hour's not great for most of you. So I think we'll always have a pretty small audience, but it's a fun audience, and hope you can join us from time to time. And I will try to join you in the daytime from time to time too. Whenever my schedule with work and family allows, if there's an opening in the day, I will try to grab it so I can share some of the wacky stuff we're doing at nighttime with you all. So thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed our experiment. Hope you found it interesting, maybe thought provoking. And if Nolan is ready, I will go ahead and raid into him. Let me get the raid ready. All right. Let me know if you're ready, Nolan. I will go ahead and raid into you. And then I'm going to go do family stuff. I'll probably be lurking when I can. Uh, I like to watch Nolan. He's doing a 1979 Mariners sim. I like to watch Ezra Denny, who's doing a 1960 San Francisco Giants sim. Ezra always has an interesting clip or some piece of baseball or pop culture to share for his seventh inning stretch. That's always a highlight for me to watch. And then I usually follow Ezra. And then some nights like tonight, I will then raid into Max LP 80. Let's give Um, Max LP 80. He does super late nights, often continuing on into the morning. And I think tonight he's going to try to continue streaming until NASBase starts in the morning. So that's pretty ambitious. Let me peek in and see if Nolan's up yet or not. Nolan, okay, Max is streaming until 4:30 Pacific. Oh, it does look like Nolan's up, so I am going to raid into. We're going to raid into Nolan. So again, thanks for joining us. AC Axel, Cavicom, thank you for the raids. Greatly appreciate it. And I will see you over there in Nolan's stream.